Hello, everyone. Um, I thought we would do the blue cards in Phyrexia all be one, the set review, focused on limited. I brought my friend Omar.
Hello.
Um, so yeah, we'll be discussing all these cards, mostly in the context of limited, but we play a bunch of Commander and Brawl and stuff. So I'm sure we'll have thoughts about some of these things in those formats too. Um, so yeah, let's just get into it. Start with the commons. So first we've got Aspirant's Ascent, which is a blue mana for an instant. It's a common. Till end of turn, target creature gets +1/+3, and gains flying and toxic 1.
Yeah, I wouldn't pick this card if I see it. It's like I do like instants like that boost your stats sometimes, but I don't know. It's like you get flying for one turn and toxic, and you only increase your attack by one. I'd go after these instances if you are trying to. I don't know. Like, yeah, I wouldn't pick this. Is all I can say, and I'd probably
Yeah.
give it like a 3.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it gives like a. It's a small bonus. Like, you could win some combat with that, and it does cost only 1 mana. And like, if you're just gonna use it to give like one toxic counter, that's like not really worth a card. But yeah, like jumps a creature, but yeah, it's kind of a meh combat trick, but I'll give it a 4. It's, not that great. Okay, how about now Bring the Ending. One in a blue for an instant. Counter target spell unless controller pays 2. And if your opponent's
This
corrupted,
is
counter anything.
Oh, this is great. Like if you're playing mono blue in draft where you're trying to be controlly, this is just great. I would give it a 7 even or an 8.
Yeah, okay, well,
Well,
7.5.
sure, that works. Like
Um,
I'm not very experienced in Magic. I haven't played that much, but like the few draft games I've played, at least for me, the game is either over too quickly in which you don't really have that much excess mana, or you're not expecting a counter spell, you know, of this sort. Like I would, if someone pulled this card against me, I would be surprised and be like, "Oh crap, I don't have the 2 mana." That's how I feel.
yeah, like usually in limited, like 3 mana counter spells are kind of annoying to hold up. 2 mana is a lot easier to hold up. And yeah, it's not going to be too hard to like
Mm,
play it at a time when they can't afford the 2 mana, and you probably get
mhm.
that counter even if they're not corrupted. And if they are corrupted, it's 2 mana, just counter a spell, which is obviously amazing. Um,
Mhm.
I just, I mean, I do think it's good. I'm just gonna give it a 6 though, because
Mhm.
I don't know, counter spells don't deal with what's already on the board, and like I don't know, they might be able to pay the 2
Mhm.
sometimes, and maybe sometimes you're not going to corrupt them, and that's just annoying, but still good. So let's move on to Chrome Prowler, which is 2 and a blue for a 3/2 artifact creature Phyrexian cat with flash, and when it enters the battlefield, tap target creature an opponent controls.
Now, I personally do like this. I would even, in draft specifically, I would even give it maybe again a 7. I would definitely pick this card if I were playing those colors. Just
Yeah,
my reasoning is it's a 3/2 for 3. That's acceptable in draft and what I from at least for me.
yeah, I think
And the
so.
flash, yeah, and the flash does help because if you're playing a control blue deck, you're probably holding a lot of mana. You want something to be able to spend that mana on if turns out your opponent didn't play the card that you wanted to counter, for instance.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And or a surprise trade, you know?
Hmm.
And the fact that you can also use it as a form of like protection for a turn, just prevent your opponent's big swinger from attacking you that turn, you know?
Yeah,
It gives you a lot of options. And the fact that it's an artifact, blue does have a lot of artifact synergies. I don't know if this set does that.
Yeah, it does. Like
But
blue is definitely an artifact color. Um,
okay, then yeah, you probably like that you have another artifact on the field.
yeah, I think that all makes sense. You could also like tap down a blocker if you're an aggressive
Mm-hmm.
deck. But yeah, I imagine a lot of the time you'll just be flashing this in to prevent like one attack from your opponent, or yeah, who knows, like trade. But ultimately, like it's a little bit tricky. Ultimately, it's kind of just a 3-2 though. I'm just gonna give it a
Mm-hmm.
5. I feel like it's just kind of middle of the road, honestly, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I would play this. All right, so next we've got Escaped Experiment, 1 in a blue for a 2/1 artifact creature, Phyrexian Beast. When this attacks, target creature an opponent controls gets -X -O until end of turn, where X is the number of artifacts you control. So here's some of the artifact synergy.
Yeah, I'm less excited about this card. Like, it is a 2 mana 2/1, but like it, I don't know. If you're gonna play this early, it'll do nothing, and it is a low mana spell, and you're hoping you would have the artifacts on the field. I feel it's just a worse version of the last card in some sense. Less options, less things it's doing.
Mhm.
Doesn't even have flash, which you could use for a surprise nerf of an opponent's creature. You
Well, this
know?
is when it attacks, so not really, but
Oh, oh, it's every time it attacks. I thought it was I misread it.
uh-huh.
Hmm. Still, I would give this a 4.
Yeah, I might be right there with you. Like, it is, it is an artifact creature. It's a 2/1. 2/1's fine. It's an artifact. That alone probably makes it okay in some decks. And it's going to
Mhm.
soften up their blockers on the attack, which like could make a big difference. Um, Sometimes I'm just gonna give it a 5. I think it's pretty middle of the road again. All right, next we've got Experimental Augury, which is 1 in a blue for an instant. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, the rest on the bottom of your library, and proliferate. So what do you
Okay,
think?
so yeah, I like this card. It's card neutral. I see, but it does filter through your cards, or it will prioritize the best of the 3 options. And the proliferate, which would be possibly huge in this specific set. Is there a lot of like +1/+1 counter synergies from other
Yeah,
colors in this
like
set?
proliferate's a huge thing in this set because you've got your oil counters, you've got the poison counters
Oh
that are on
yeah.
your opponent. I mean, mostly it's those two things, but like proliferate is specifically a synergy that you're trying to go for in a lot of different decks. So yeah, I think it's kind of a nice thing.
I'd give
Um,
this a 6.
yeah, 6. Like, yeah, I mean, I agree. It's like good card selection. We were already like this is already even if you just didn't have proliferate on there, it would still be a card I would probably play pretty happily.
Mm-hmm.
And like even in like
Mm-hmm.
constructed, like in uh
Mm-hmm.
brawl, like any sort of like super friends like planeswalker deck, or like if you care about proliferating, like I think this is actually really good in those
Yeah,
kinds of
if you
decks.
yeah, in constructed, I would definitely put this because of the proliferate. In draft, only if I'm lucky enough that I have oil counters and poison counters synergy. If that's what someone's going for, I would give this more than a 6. This would be a definite pick. But assuming you don't know for sure, for instance, what you're going for while picking cards, you're weighing your options. It's good, regardless if you end up using the proliferate or not.
Yeah,
So yeah, I'm
yeah.
sticking to my
I'm
number.
gonna go like
Mhm.
6.5. I think it's like yeah, it could be pretty good. All right, next
Mhm.
we've got Eye of Malcator. Don't know if I'm saying that right. 2 in a blue for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, scry 2. Whenever another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, it becomes a 4/4 for the turn.
Eh,
Ew.
no, I don't like this.
Okay.
It's like yes, Scry is nice, and it's just it becomes a 4/4. It's a 3 mana that sometimes becomes a 4/4 if an artifact enters. No,
Yeah, and it's
I
like
would give this a two.
almost always gonna be like on your opponent's turn, or sorry, on your turn you're getting this, so you can't really block with it. I mean, we just saw a
Mhm.
flashed artifact creature, so like potentially you could surprise your opponent.
Who would not build around that?
Yeah, I mean, at least use Scry 2. I mean, yes, 3 mana to Scry 2 is kind of bad, but like,
Mhm.
also you're attacking as a 4/4 a lot of the time if you are playing artifacts like turn after turn, though. It's like, honestly, no, I'm thinking this is like, maybe not the best thing ever, but like, I'd give it a 5. It's kind
Mhm.
of aggressive. Like, if you're just planning on
Mhm.
attacking, it's big for the cost, and you get the Scry 2. But like that all only
Mhm.
works if you have a bunch of artifacts. But
Mhm.
people are probably trying to do that, so I'm gonna give it a 5.
Mhm.
All right. Next we have a Gitaxian Anatomist, which is 3 and a blue for a 2/5 creature, Phyrexian wizard. When it enters the battlefield, you may tap it. If you do, proliferate.
Um, Honestly, if it were 1 mana cheaper, I would like it. 4 mana 2/5 that only proliferates once and can't be used as a blocker that turn. When like that's the whole purpose
Yeah, I mean,
behind
you
it, I
could just
feel.
not
No.
proliferate if you really just wanted the two
Yeah,
five now.
that is true. If it were 3 mana 1/5, let's say, I would be happy. But
Mm-hmm.
um, I might give it a, I don't know, 4.
Okay.
It's
Yeah, I
like,
mean, I don't think
eh.
it's anything too crazy. 2/5 for 4.
Mhm.
The right deck might want that. And the
Mhm.
proliferate, it's a thing that's good to have in this format. I think it's like
Mhm.
kind of a
Yeah.
role filler, but it's not like exactly
Yeah.
good. I'm gonna give it a 5. All right, and our next card is Gitaxian Raptor, which is a 1/4 creature Phyrexian bird with flying, and it enters the battlefield with 3 oil counters on it, and you can remove an oil counter from it to give it +1/-1 until end of turn.
Yeah. Now this one I like. So it's a nice flying blocker,
Mm-hmm.
and you could occasionally just surprise an opponent by increasing your damage to take out an attacker. So the opponents will be afraid to attack into this, right? You could at any time just make it a what 4/1
Yeah, I
instead
mean,
and
one
trade.
time. It's like it's very oil hungry
Yeah,
to like do much damage with
yeah,
it though.
yeah. I mean, you'd probably just leave it as a blocker while flying, and then threaten your opponent with a trade if they ever want to attack into it. Like if they attack
Yeah.
with a 1/1, you don't care. If they attack with a 2/2, you could take that out with no risk to you. A lot of enemies will be opponents will be afraid of attacking into it, I feel.
Yeah, no, that's true.
And if you're late game, just put it all into attack and win the game. Also, the fact that it relies on oil counters, you could with proliferate do this trick multiple times, right?
Yeah.
Like obviously you're not going to turn into a 5/0, but could you? I don't know about the
I
ruling.
mean, you
Like if at
could.
instant speed.
It's just not smart.
Okay. Okay.
um, yeah. Yeah, you kind of sold me on this. Like I was not thinking that highly about it just because it's so oil hungry, but yeah, just the threat of changing the stats is pretty nice on the block because it's gonna block as like the most convenient of its like possible stats.
Mm,
Um,
exactly.
and your opponent's not gonna like want to attack their 2/2 into a 2/3 flying, for example. They're not gonna attack any of their X1s
Mm,
into it just by default. So it's like a
mhm,
pretty nice defensive card.
mhm.
Yeah,
I'd give this a 6.
yeah. I was
Like,
gonna give this 6 too.
mhm.
All right, next we have Glistener Seer, which is a blue mana for a 0/3 creature Phyrexian advisor. It enters with 3 oil counters, and you can remove an oil counter to scry 1.
It's a 1 mana drop. I like this. It can even have defender, and I would like it. Now, obviously, you're not going to do anything with 0 attack, but you never know. You boost
Well, I mean,
everyone's
it's
attack, and you
not
can
draw, but scry.
yeah, and it does scry you, which would just help you filter out. If you play it early, you can filter out non-lands to try and get more lands into your hand. Late game, you can filter out lands, and it's just 1 mana for a 0/3. No,
Mhm.
I like this card.
Yeah,
I honestly might even seek it out a bit if I don't have 1 drops, in my deck. So it'd be I would say 6.5. You know.
yeah, I like this card also. Like, just on 1 mana. Usually in draft, you don't have anything to do on 1 mana, like, because there's not always a
Mhm,
good 1 drop. But this is pretty good. I mean,
mhm,
it's always been like there's been cards like this in lots of drafts. Um, Scrying one every turn adds up to quite a lot of like card quality over the course of the game. Of course, this has a limit. If you're not proliferating, you just get to do
mhm,
it 3 times. But like, hey,
mhm,
1 mana to scry one 3 times is honestly really good. If you're able to do all that. And hey, it's also not got useless stats. You can block creatures with this pretty
mhm.
well in the very early game. So like, yeah, I have no complaints with it. I don't know if I want to give it like a 6 or a 7. I'll just give it a 7. I don't know. I think it's pretty good. All right. Next we have Icar Synthesizer, which is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 creature Phyrexian wizard. When you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on it, and if it has 4 or more oil counters on it, it gets +2/+0 and can't be blocked.
It's like it's harder to pull off on draft. That's the problem. But like obviously, if you have a deck that is suited to getting a lot of non-creature spells, this would be huge in draft. I feel your opponent might not have all the removal, and just having a 3/3 unblockable could just be a game decider, right?
Yeah, like that's definitely big for a 2 mana creature, obviously, but it is going to be tough to get those 4 oil counters on there. Like most decks are going to
Mm-hmm.
be mostly
Creature
creatures.
based.
I mean, you can always proliferate to once you get 1 counter on
Yeah,
there.
that's true.
It's
That's
still
true.
gonna be kind of hard. I feel like I would rather just play like a 4 mana 3/2 flyer or something, just no work. Like I know I'm eventually gonna get 4 lands and I can play it, but like this, it's
Yeah.
like you have to get lucky just to get there. Um,
But if you're not the typical draft deck, you
yeah,
might be able to pull this off.
in like a hyper synergistic deck, this could be good. I feel like the average case is much more meh, or like you're just not gonna turn that on very often. And even when you turn it on, it's
Mhm.
like, okay, it's a pretty good creature. It's still nothing crazy.
Yeah, it's not crazy, but I don't know. I would give it a 5, but with an asterisk. Only use it if you think you can get the synergy
Hmm.
in draft. Like you never guarantee it, but
Yeah, I think I was actually just playing with this card in draft, and I was a proliferate deck, and I was not ever able to turn this on. I'm just gonna give it
Mm,
a 4. I don't know. I'm not feeling so good about it. Maybe it's easier
mm.
than I'm giving it credit, or maybe there's a better way to turn it on, but anyways. So
Mhm.
next we have Malcator's Watcher, which is a 1 and a blue for a 1/1 flying vigilance. And when this dies, draw a card.
It's a filler.
Yeah, I mean,
Like yeah, it's a it's a 2 mana 1/1 flying vigilance. Yeah, and it's card neutral. It dies. You trade. I don't know. Okay, you get a card to replace it.
yeah, it's like one of those cards. It's
It
like kind of bad, but at the same time, it doesn't really cost you much. So, like,
yeah
you could play it, it'll probably be fine.
yeah
You could just chump block
yeah
something and like effectively gain some life, draw a card. Like you're not really hurting yourself by playing this. Um,
Mhm. It, like, yeah, it's. Do you have a better option in your pick? No? Okay, pick this. That's how I feel.
oh, one nice thing about it though is like equipments are kind of a thing in this format, and like this holds equipments well.
Mm,
You put a plus
mm,
2 plus
yeah,
0 on this, and like flying vigilance 3/1. It's pretty
I
good.
see. Yeah, that makes sense. I
Um, yeah.
um so I would say 3.5.
Okay. I was gonna go a little higher. Like I think in just random deck, it's like a 5. In like deck that cares about either like sacrifice or equipments, it's like a 6. Um, I'll just say 5 though.
Mm,
All right, next we've got Meldweb Curator, which is 3 and a blue for a 3/4 creature Phyrexian wizard. When it enters the battlefield, put up to one target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard on top of your library.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this one. I think like if you're I assume you will be playing this if you have an instance of sorcery heavy deck.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it doesn't go to your hand, it goes to the top of your library is what makes me dislike this. Like you're already not that good on stats, and you're pretty expensive and pretty expensive, and you're gonna deny me a card draw,
Yeah,
or I don't know, be card neutral.
yeah. It's card neutral.
It's
It's card selection.
Yeah, it's card selection.
Um,
It's a
honestly,
4.
4.
Mm,
Okay. I mean, the
mm,
stats honestly aren't that bad though. Like
mhm,
3/4 for 4, that kind of like matches favorably against a lot of the things people would play. Like there's tons of 3/3s
mhm,
and things like that.
mhm,
And you know, it's usually better to draw an instant or sorcery from your graveyard than like a random card if you already have enough lands or whatever. Um,
mhm.
so I'll say this is like 5.5. That's how I feel about it. All right, moving on to Meldweb Strider, which is 4 and a blue for a 5/5 artifact vehicle with vigilance, and it enters the battlefield with an oil counter. You can pretty much use the oil counter to crew it, but it also has crew 3.
Oh, I really like this card. It's not that great, and maybe even less great in draft. No, I would say it's not that great in either draft or constructed, maybe, unless you really proliferate. Like if it were to be constructed, it needs to be cheaper on mana, in my opinion. You know,
Yeah, I mean the
like 5 mana,
stats.
5/5. Yeah,
Yeah, with vehicles, you kind of
but
need the stats to be like bigger than the cost for it to be worth it.
yeah, but the vigilance does make it nice that you can go on attack and on defense with your crewing. But the crew 3 is shit.
Yeah.
I still think I would consider getting it just because of the oil counter mechanic. Because sure, you can use it on attack maybe once per turn. Let's say you had a 3/1 you don't want to sacrifice,
Hmm.
or 3/1 ones. You can use this on an attack, and then if your opponent attacked into you, use that oil counter on defense. You know,
Yeah, like the threat oil
and
counter.
exactly, and your opponent won't attack into it. And then if you do end up using it, proliferate, and now you can do it again. You know.
Hmm.
So yeah, that oil counter is a threat, a 5/5 threat on defense, and you can just be aggressive with it on attacks thanks to its vigilance.
Hmm.
So I actually would consider picking it, and I might even give it a 5.5, somewhere between a 5 and a 6. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, if I ignore the oil counter, it's kind of a bad vehicle. Crew's expensive for like the stats that are fine, and the vigilance is nice, but it's still kind of small. I mean, it's still just absolute wise a pretty big creature, I guess, in blue.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm,
I'm just gonna give it a 5. I don't know. I think it'd be fine in most decks, but nothing
mhm.
crazy. All right, next we have Mesmerizing Dose, which is 1 blue for enchantment aura, enchant creature. When it enters, tap enchanted creature, then proliferate. And enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step.
Yeah, I like this. You don't have that much. I would I know it's not a removal per se, but it does take care of certain if most opponents' creatures,
It's like
right?
basically removal. I mean, sure,
It's
it
basically,
won't
I
it won't
mean,
some creatures, yeah, have abilities this doesn't stop, but
exactly. Yeah,
most
just the
creatures, I want to say most creatures in draft are just basically stats, or like can't really do
exactly.
anything if they can't attack or block.
Yeah. So that's
Um,
technically not a removal, but it's effectively a removal. And it proliferates. That's like I would pick it even without a proliferate. I
yeah,
would say if I see this while drafting, I'd be like, yeah, give it to me. I would give it maybe a 7.5. You know what? An eight.
yeah, I was gonna give it an 8 too, yeah. And like even honestly, even in like Brawl, I would consider this in certain decks
Yeah,
where like the proliferate's
yeah.
good. Um, yeah, it's a good card,
and
especially at common. Probably one of
and
the gotta be one of the best commons in blue.
I'll just say, give me some of that dose. They seem to be
Yeah,
having
they're
a
they're having
chill
a
time.
I don't know if I'd say a good time, but they sure are having something of a time. All right. So next we have Prologue to Phyresis, which is 1 and a blue for an instant. Each opponent gets a poison counter, draw a card. Pretty simple.
I mean, at first, it feels like it's a waste of a card, and it is, but it is card neutral.
Yeah, it's
So
not
it's a
really a
waste of
waste of
two
a
mana,
card.
really.
Yeah,
It is a waste of
it's a
two
waste of
mana.
tempo, but it's card
Yeah.
neutral. And if you really want that poison counter,
Yeah.
sure. I mean,
It, if you're playing poison counters, I honestly, if you're specifically, if you're playing toxic or poison counters, I'd honestly pick this just because, if you're in blue, you probably have a lot of instances, that counter spell, etc. This is a card you would cast at the end of your opponent's turn if you did not play the card that you were holding up mana to play, you know?
yeah, and
So you
like
don't waste those two mana.
honestly, it
And
seems like
yeah.
what I've been interpreting from this set is like most colors have some toxic, but only some colors actually care about killing with poison counters. Like most of the colors just want to get corrupted, and like that's it. So like this gets you a third of the way to corrupted, and it draws you a card,
Mhm.
and you can then proliferate that counter. So like I think if your deck has corruption, you kind of want this. It's totally
Mhm.
unblockable, um, and it just gets the ball
Mhm.
rolling.
Mhm.
Um,
So
I think in
I
the
would
right deck, I
say,
would give this like a 6.
yeah, I was going to give it a 5 just because you don't know if you'll be able to pull off that corrupted deck when you see this card in a pick. You don't know if you'll get what you want, but
Yeah. So next we have Quicksilver Fisher, which is 3 blue for a 4/3 creature Phyrexian Drake with flying. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card, then discard a card.
5 mana 4/3 flying, draw, discard. No, just a no. I would
No?
give it a 3.5. Like, yeah,
Okay.
if I were desperate, I'd pick it if I were desperate, but I don't know. Especially it's too blue, and I might be playing multicolor. I don't know for sure I'm going to be a mono blue. You rarely mono any color in draft.
Yeah, you don't
I
really need to
only
be
know one
mono
person
to
who.
afford this, but
That's true. That's true.
so I'd say the one
But
that like honestly I think in most sets this would be decent. Like that's a lot of power with flying that they can't necessarily block and they kind of need to deal with.
yeah, fair.
But like the thing
I
is,
like.
this isn't really synergistic with anything going on in these colors. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe graveyard, but that's not that
Mhm,
strong of a thing from what I've seen. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. So yeah, like it's not that
mhm.
synergistic. I think the stats are kind of good though. Like honestly, 4 power on a flyer, kind of more than you often get at common. So I'm just gonna give it a 5.
Mhm,
It's kind of
mhm,
scary, honestly.
mhm.
All right, so now the last common, we can take a break. Vivisurgeon's Insight, which is 3 blue for a sorcery, which says draw 3 cards, proliferate.
I I tend to like picking cards like this and then usually regret them. I'm dead before I cast it. Again, I'm a bad Magic player. I do play a lot of Magic. I
No,
just
I mean
bad.
that's you realizing something about playing sorceries that don't do anything to the board.
Yeah.
um,
But this is kind of the type of cards I tend to pick. But,
yeah, I think this like has its role. If you're gonna win with a controlling strategy, you kind of need to get that card advantage at some point. So like, this does it. It's 5 mana and doesn't affect the board much. I mean, proliferate, but you're really just proliferating
yeah.
oil and poison counters, and that doesn't really usually affect the board.
Yeah. Yeah. This isn't a change board state kind of spell. It's more of a refuel your engine type of spell, right?
Yeah, and like you hope you
Like,
have the time to actually resolve this and then use the cards you draw.
yeah. I would give it a 4.
Yeah, I was gonna give it a 4 also. Alright, so now we have Atmosphere Surgeon, our first uncommon, which is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 creature Phyrexian wizard. With whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on it, and you can remove an oil counter from it to give a creature flying until end of turn, but only as a sorcery.
Yeah, so I like this card, especially if I'm going to be playing a lot of non-creature spells, which is possible in draft, right?
It's possible.
And yeah, it's a 2 mana 2/1. You can give creatures flying multiple times. You could just focus on giving your biggest threat flying every turn. I like this card. And like usual, the threat of giving someone flying could dissuade an opponent from
Well,
attacking with a
no,
flyer.
it's a sorcery, so
Oh,
no.
it's a sorcery. Yeah, that's true. Okay, then I'd give this a 6.
6? Okay. I kind of. It's nice to give flying in some kind of specific situations, like mainly if you're green. Like if you're not green, I don't even think this is good. But I think if you're green, you could jump some things over like a locked up, gummed up board. Who knows? Maybe you could even do it in other colors too. But I don't know. This just doesn't excite me for some reason. I'm just gonna give it a 5. I don't even know how to enunciate it. Just like a lot of the time you're like trying just to like get control of the board, and this doesn't help with that. It's only kind of good if you're gridlocked. So yeah, that's just where I'm at on this. So the next card we've got is Distorted Curiosity, which is 2 and a blue for a sorcery, and as long as an opponent's corrupted, it costs 2 less, and you draw 2 cards.
Mm, It's it's fine if I mean, I know you're playing. There's a lot of toxic being played this game, but I'm gonna assume most of the time you want to cast this, you're not gonna get the corrupted effect. That's just my guess.
Okay.
So 3 mana, draw 2 card. So it's just draw an extra card and pay 3 mana. Yeah, I might pick it. I'd give it a 4.
4. Okay, I think this card is actually really good. Like, this is, if they are corrupted, I'm on the other hand gonna assume it's not too hard to do. Like, there's ways to put the counter on really easily with like that common that just puts a counter and draws you a card. And you can proliferate that. There's toxic creatures, so many toxic creatures. Um, and 1 mana to draw 2 cards is kind of insane. That's like almost Pot of Greed level. Like, if that existed, it would be like the #1 most broken card in like every format ever. So like, I'm gonna give this a 7. I think it's really good. Now we have Font of Progress, which is a single blue for an artifact, enters with 2 oil counters on it, and you can pay 3 and tap it to have target player mill X, where X is the number of oil counters on it.
Unless you're playing a graveyard deck, I don't think you're gonna mill out your opponent in
Yeah,
draft.
that's the question. I mean, in draft, 40 cards, it's probably easier to mill people out than in other
I
formats.
don't
I mean, other than, having bad cards to do it, but like
exactly.
this,
So
it's slow. If you could put a bunch of counters on it, I don't
I'll
know.
have to see how. Yeah, I want to know how many more milk cards are there in this set.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I would say this is a 1. I would not even pick it. I would not even
Yeah,
consider picking it.
I was actually gonna give it a 1 too. Like, I mean, if you were milling yourself and you cared about your graveyard, that's more reasonable. It's still kind of expensive, and I haven't really gotten the vibe that blue really cares about the graveyard. So, like, maybe if you're with other colors that care about the graveyard, I don't know. It just doesn't seem good. Alright, so next we have Minor Misstep, which is a single blue mana for an instant that just says counter target spell with mana value 1 or less.
I don't know what I would pick. Like, how many more spells? Like, what counts as a mana value 1 or less, other than just you're casting a spell for 1 mana or less.
I mean, in
Like,
draft, not really anything. In constructed, there are some things that like you kind of cast for free that this could get. I
I
don't
see.
I don't think it would really happen in this draft
Okay,
format.
then yeah, I would not pick this card. It's a 2.
2? Okay. I'm just gonna give it straight up like a 1. Because like the vast majority of cards being played cost more than 1, and those are the cards you care the least about countering anyways. It's just a waste of a card. It's gonna be dead so often. Like this really feels more like a constructed card, and even then, what's that? I forget the name of that card. That's like just a Phyrexian mana and kind of does this, but that one's like free basically. So I don't think. I just think this
Mm-hmm.
card's kind of bad.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so next we have Reject Imperfection, which is 1 blue blue for an instant that says counter target spell. If that spell's mana value was 3 or less, proliferate.
For draft, this is good. No, 3 mana counter, and you get to proliferate if you want. If you're lucky.
Yeah,
So I would say this is really good for draft, like a 7.
7. I kind of am not a huge fan of 3 mana counter spells in draft just because a lot of the time you're just trying to play out creatures and like you choose to play out a creature that turn and then that's when they decide to resolve their threat and you don't have this up so you just are kind of screwed. um it still does deal with literally anything. And the proliferate's nice. I want to give it like a 5 or a 6. I'll give it a 5.5. Alright, so next we have Serum Snare, which is 1 in a blue for an instant. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If that permanent had mana value 3 or less, proliferate.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I like this. It's deal with the threat that's currently on the board. The opponent will have to cast it again. You're slowing them down by a turn. Uh, um, yeah, no, I like this card. It's also a 7 for me.
Okay, cool. Um, I mean, the thing about bounce is it's card disadvantage. It's all tempo advantage is what you're getting. Which can be good, especially if you're aggressive and like the proliferate's nice. But like I always wish it's 1 mana instead of 2 mana, but this is what we get. I feel like this is just kind of middle of the road, like a 5. I just bounce is not always the best. All right, so next we have Tamiyo's Immobilizer. Oh gosh, did they use this to immobilize Tamiyo? Which is 3 and a blue for an artifact, and Tamiyo's Immobilizer enters with 4 oil counters on it, and you can remove an oil counter to tap an artifact or creature. Well, tap it and remove an oil counter.
Normally, I'd be like, I would if it's just 4 uses, I wouldn't like it that much. No, honestly, in draft where you're like close to the end game, you probably the fact that you can proliferate and just increase the oil counters is what sells this, I would say. Uh, I like this card. I would consider putting it in a deck that is like maybe like slightly fast, where I need to deal a lot of damage early. And yeah, 6.5.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a
And like I remember, I really like cards in draft like Icy Manipulator that's like basically this, but you pay 1 and tap a thing and you can just do that forever. And like the potential to like I think of that as more like a control card, and the potential for this to like stop working eventually kind of worries me. But still, like 4 oil counters, that's quite a few. The game might come to a conclusion before you run out of those. So, I'm actually not sure if this is good or not, really, but I'll give it a 6. I'm not sure how often you're going to run out of those counters. But yeah, if your deck has a lot of proliferate, obviously that's going to make it a lot closer to Icy Manipulator. Alright, so next we have Tamiyo's Logbook, which is 2 and a blue for an artifact that says 5 and a blue and tap, draw a card, and this costs 1 less for each other artifact you control.
like we've seen some artifact creatures early, but I don't know how. I think this set does have a lot of artifacts, maybe more than usual, right?
Yeah, it
In
definitely
terms
has
of like
more than usual,
colorless.
for sure.
So let's say hypothetically you managed to get 3 other artifacts. So it's like it's for each other artifact. Yeah. So let's say you had 3 other artifacts at some point in the game. You were playing an artifact deck.
Mhm.
Maybe this would I doubt you'd be able to get this to just a blue, in which case this is a really good card. Even 2 mana and tap, I would say, is good. But is 3 mana and tap good? I
I
don't
don't know.
know.
I think no matter how you cut it, this card's kind of slow. And
It
I,
is
I
slow,
doubt,
but
like, it would be an incredible card if you could fully reduce that cost to 1. I don't think that's gonna happen.
like, what if you are playing a slow deck, a disruptive, control-y type of deck, and you had a lot of artifacts as well? Then I could see this being good. I would consider picking this and then assessing if I would sideboard it or put it in my deck later. So I think if I see this card, I'd be like, huh, it's worth consider picking this and seeing how my deck ends up in the end, before playing. I would
Mhm.
give this a 4.
Okay, yeah, it's like a more controlling card. If you had a lot of artifacts, the mana efficiency will be decent, maybe. Um, yeah, I'm right there with you, like 4 or 5, something like that. I'll go with 4-2. I'm usually not going to be looking to take this very aggressively. Okay, next we have Thrumming Bird for 1 and a blue, which is actually a reprint. A 1/1 creature Phyrexian bird horror with flying, and when it deals combat damage to a player, proliferate.
I like this card. It's 2 mana, 1/1 flying, and yeah, you're gonna possibly be able to proliferate multiple times with it, especially early game before your opponent might get their, I don't know, whatever they have, their board is setting up to protect themselves from flying. So yeah, if I see this card, and I know I am playing an oil counter deck, which is a very good chance that you are doing that, considering it's, the set.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
this is an
probably you are in a lot of decks.
um, this is an 8. I would take
8,
this
yeah, I
card.
was thinking about 8, 7 or 8. Like this, you just put it down so cheaply. It has the evasion. It's likely to hit in and proliferate multiple times. Like there's really just not any other proliferate enabler that I've seen that's like so good at it. You're just gonna get so many triggers off of this, unless they put up any flying blocker. Obviously, that's the problem with it being a 1/1. And that's why I think I'm not gonna quite give it an 8. I'll give it the 7, just because, yeah, if anything else is in the sky, you can't really do much with this. Um, but yeah, definitely is gonna enable all of those proliferate strategies really well. All right, next we have Transplant Theorist, which is 3 and a blue for a 2/4 artifact creature, Phyrexian Artificer. And whenever it or another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you can draw a card and discard a card. And you can also pay 2 to put target card from your graveyard on the bottom of your library.
I mean, that activated ability. How would that be helpful in draft?
That is a
Is
good
there?
question. I have no idea. Like, it seems
Hmm.
not that helpful.
Yeah. So we like in constructed. I'm sure there are a lot of combos, or a lot of strategies, or a lot of ways of taking advantage of that. But in draft, I don't see it.
Prevents you from being milled to death?
Yeah, but not at a fast enough rate.
Maybe they just
You know.
thought you'd be drawing and discarding so much you need something like this just to not kill yourself, but that's probably a little
Mm,
overcautious.
yeah, I agree. Like if you were playing this card and that was a concern, maybe this is one of those situations where you play above 40 cards, or I don't know. You tell me.
I don't know. It's
Yeah.
it's not gonna happen. Like we can just ignore that. That's like not important.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, the activated ability, the triggered ability, the when something enters the battlefield, you draw and discard. Yeah, no, I like this card. That could be very useful. Um, it's a 4 mana for that. When like I guess in constructed, there's a lot of like 4 mana just to draw, no need to discard. But we are in draft,
Yeah,
so
this is definitely not
if
good
I
enough for constructed.
yeah, um, but if I see this in draft, I'd probably pick it. I'd be like, hey, I can. It's not card advantage, but you would improve the quality of your hand, right? What do they call
Yeah,
that? Improving the quality of
card
your hand?
quality filtering.
Filtering. Okay. Yeah, I would strongly consider getting this a 7.
7, okay. Yeah, I mean, I was gonna give it a 6, but yeah, same ballpark there. Just helps you dig for your best cards. And if you have a lot of artifacts, it's even better. Just digs you a lot. Any of these cards that like draw and discard on a regular basis are usually pretty good.
Mhm.
All right, next we've got Trawler Drake for 2 and a blue, which is a 0/0 creature Phyrexian Drake. I know what you're thinking. Uh, there must be something else. Yeah, it's a 0/0
Hmm.
flying. Um, with when Trawler Drake enters the battlefield. Sorry. Troller Drake enters the battlefield with an oil counter on it. Troller Drake gets +1/+1 for each oil counter on it, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on it.
Really good in my opinion. Like it's gonna be. We already consider 2 mana 1/1 flying to be acceptable. You know,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully with some extra ability to be good. This is a 3 mana 1/1, but it grows. And even without that last line, I would be considering it if I proliferate a lot. But the fact that it also gets an oil counter anytime it casts a non-creature spell, that just makes it good in my opinion. It's just gonna grow quickly, depending on the type of deck you play. But
Yeah,
like if you're gonna pick this, you're probably playing the kind of deck that it synergizes with a bit.
yeah,
So assuming you are playing a heavy proliferate or a heavy non-creature spell deck, which can happen. I know I haven't played that much draft, so I know I do know that you tend to be very creature oriented, but it's not a guarantee. People can be trying other strategies. So what I'm trying to say is I like this card, and I would give it a 7.
yeah. I like it too.
Yeah.
I think at this cost, you'd really only expect like a 2/2 flyer or something. So if you can just proliferate once or cast one non-creature spell, it's already like at stat, and like above that, it's big. Like feels like
Mhm.
half of draft games end when somebody plays a big flyer, and that just like carries them through. And this can get pretty
Mhm.
dang big for that 3 mana. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I'd give it a 7 only because it takes a bit of work. Like in the right deck, it might be, I don't know, you could say it's better than that.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's good. All right, next we have Unctus's Retrofitter, which is 2 in a blue for a 2/3 creature Phyrexian Artificer with Toxic 1. When it enters the battlefield, up to one target artifact you control becomes an artifact creature with base power and toughness 4/4 for as long as this remains on the battlefield.
Yeah. So it's a 3 mana 2/3 that can give you a 4/4 as long as it's on the battlefield, and it has Toxic 1. I don't think it even needs that for me to say it's good, in my
Yeah,
opinion. And yeah, if I see that card, I'm definitely picking it if I'm in that color. So, and especially if I'm playing artifacts, which, you're blue, you probably are in this set, it seems.
yeah,
So I would say this is an 8.
yeah, 8. I was gonna say 7.5. Like, just the stats on this are so much. Like, 2/3 for 3. Already, I mean, that's bad if it was on its own, but like, still not that bad. And then you get that 4/4. Like, it should be said, like, it depends what you're turning into a 4/4. If you're turning, like, a Skull Bomb into a 4/4, just like a kind of useless 1 mana artifact that's not even a creature, that's like getting the most out of it. You get, all those stats, like, it's like a 6/7 of stats for 3 mana, which is pretty crazy. You know, Obviously, if this dies, you lose both things. It's not quite that, but it's a ton of stats. And like that 4/4 can attack with haste, possibly, also. So yeah, that's just chunky, chunky, chunky. All right. So next we have Watchful Blister Zoa, which is 4 blue for a 4/4 creature Phyrexian jellyfish with flying, and it enters the battlefield with an oil counter. When it dies, you draw cards equal to the number of oil counters on it.
I mean, a 4/4 flying is nice, really nice. And sure, it's 6 mana, but, I would still consider picking it over that. I might end up sideboarding it if I think if the mana curve is too high. But I would consider adding it to my card collection, let's just say, or like what I'm using in that game. I don't know. What do you call your main deck plus sideboard?
I don't know. Just the
Yeah,
cards you picked.
the cards. I would definitely want it to be on the roster in case I think a big flyer is what I need. But I don't know how much to expect from that card draw because it'll enter the game late. It probably won't get advantage of proliferating a lot, right?
Yeah, maybe. But hey, like,
So
it's always going to draw you one card when it dies, right?
that's true. It's card neutral in some sense, I
I mean,
guess. I
it's
don't
no,
know.
it's still like a 2-for-1 if they
Yeah,
spend the removal on it.
yeah. So I would say it's a 6.5.
Yeah, I think this is pretty good. Like, if it was just a 4-4 with flying for 6, like, that's a little slow, but, like, still, it's big. Like, it doesn't matter how slow it is, kind of, if it's that big and flying and it's gonna kill them. Like, um, so even that kind of just vanilla creature, I kind of like in a lot of decks. And this is way better than that. I mean, you draw the card if it dies. Potentially, you're drawing a lot of cards. I mean, I wouldn't say a lot, like 2 or 3 is really like what you'd hope for. But if that happens, I mean, that's like kind of a huge blowout, so I'll give it a 7. All right, so now on to the rares. We've got Blade of Shared Souls for 2 and a blue, which is an artifact equipment, and it has 4 Mirrodin, which means when it enters, you get a 2/2 red rebel to equip it to, and when it becomes attached to a creature, for as long as this blade remains attached to it, you may have the creature become a copy of another target creature you control. Also, it has equip 2.
So yeah, just for a question, are all rebel creatures red? I just wanted to ask.
Yeah,
At least
well,
me.
I mean,
Okay.
no, if you mean like throughout the history of Magic, I feel like I remember Rebels being like more of a white thing, but are
What
there
about
black Rebels? I don't know.
new Phyrexian related rebel creatures?
Oh, yeah, I don't
Or
remember like Phyrexian Rebels as like a whole creature type thing. This is kind
okay,
of new, maybe? Don't quote me on that.
yes, yeah. Well, anyways, so yeah, I like this card. It's if you have, I don't know, it's like you get to clone something for 3, and do you get to change what you're copying, or is it that once you pick, it sticks to it?
So it's when it becomes attached. So you pick when it becomes attached. So like if you move it to something else,
Okay.
then you get to switch.
Hmm. And it's for as long as it remains attached. Okay. So yeah, it's just that it's basically a 3 mana clone that also gets to you get to with changing your equip costs, by equipping maybe and re-equipping, you get to change who you're cloning. This is really good. Like you could probably do some if you have a big flyer, like we just talked in the last card, or if you had whatever other things that can help you win the game. I don't know. It's a 3 mana clone. I like that. I
Yeah.
consider that in constructed
It's like unfortunate
strongly.
being able to only clone your own stuff. Like that's always annoying.
Yeah,
Like
that's
when
true.
you're losing and they've killed all your big stuff and it's like, oh well, I guess I'm cloning nothing good then. But like when you're cloning your
Mhm.
opponent's stuff, then even if you're losing, like it's great, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
and worst case, it just gets you a 2/2. I know it's for 3, but
yeah, I mean, yeah,
it's something.
something.
Um, I mean, I would say this is a 9. I would
A
definitely pick
9?
this card
Okay,
if I
okay. Yeah,
if I'm in
that's
those colors. I see this card. I'm ignoring the. I'd most likely ignore the rest of the my options and pick this.
okay. I feel a little more worried about like getting a good creature on my side to actually copy. So like I'll give it a 7. I mean, I think it's good. Clones are almost always good in
Yeah,
draft.
yeah. It's like when picking this card, I'd be like, "Hey, I'll take this. I'll worry about finding a big creature to clone later."
But yeah,
In drafting.
I'm changing it to 8 because you can keep like moving it around and upgrading it to the biggest thing you've played. So there's a lot
Mhm.
of potential. I'll just go with that. Alright, so next we have Blue Sun's Twilight, which is X blue blue for a sorcery. Gain control of target creature with mana value X or less. If X is 5 or more, create a token that's a copy of that creature. Oh boy.
Yeah, this is really good. I know maybe in draft you're not gonna ramp up or last that long to be able to cast something big, but yeah, no, this is huge. From just the few games of draft that I played against you, the times where you steal my creatures, and that's just the game decider move. Yeah, this I would say this is also one of those cards that if I see it, I'm gonna pick it. It's a 10, honestly.
Yeah, I was gonna give this a 10 too. Like, especially if you actually can afford the 7 mana to make that X5. Like, you steal their best creature and you get a copy. Like, how are you not winning if you do that? Is how it feels.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I'll give it actually a 9, only because if you're not getting it to 7 mana, I mean, you can only steal cheaper creatures. It's like still good. It's just slightly less exciting. But yeah,
You're gonna disrupt your
yeah,
like worst case, you're disrupting your opponent's strategy and giving yourself a better advantage on your board, you know?
yeah. 9.5.
But
All right. Moving on to Encroaching Mycosynth, which is 3 and a blue for an artifact, which says non-land permanents you control are artifacts in addition to their other types. The same is true for permanent spell you control and non-land permanent cards you own that aren't on the battlefield.
I think I've mentioned this card to you before, and if I understand how it works correctly, this could be very huge in what do you call it? In constructed. Just everything that you own is an artifact, including if it's in your library, right?
Yeah.
So for like tutor purposes, for instance, stuff like that.
Yeah, like with Fabricate, you could tutor any permanent card, things like that.
Hmm.
It's kind of
But
weird. Like if you were really an artifacty deck, though, like you don't need this because your deck's cards are
it's
already
true.
artifacts. But like if there's some
Yeah.
combo, I don't actually know like what the combo would be, but
Hmm.
it definitely makes you think of combos. That's for sure.
Hmm. And but in draft, I can see how this could be very useful. This could be useful. I wouldn't say very useful. And like a lot of the activated abilities that depend on they care about the number of artifacts that you have. But all this card does is improve the amount of artifacts you have on field. It's not that big in draft. Like maybe you're lucky and you will synergize with some stuff, but maybe it won't. Like it it's a 4. I wouldn't
Yeah.
care too much about it.
Yeah, it's
I'd
like it's
consider it.
only it makes certain cards pretty good. Like if we go back here a second, we were looking at like this logbook. It would probably make this cost 1 mana pretty easily.
Yeah.
But like,
But like yeah, what are the odds you get that and this? You know, if you're
yeah,
picking one.
it just does
Yeah.
like on its own, it does nothing, and
Yeah.
possibly even makes your stuff easier to remove because it's like.
Yes.
So I hate I kind
That's
of hate this. I'm gonna give it a 2.
yeah.
And it only gets 2 because like somebody could be creative and I would be impressed with them.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, that's
oh,
that
have
that's where my four was. Like maybe you could find yourself really really benefiting from this. Maybe, depending on your luck drafting.
mhm.
But yeah.
All right. So next we have Mercurial Spelldancer for 1 and a blue. It's a 2/1 creature Phyrexian rogue. It can't be blocked. When you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on it. When it deals combat damage to a player, you can remove 2 oil counters from it. And if you do, your next instant sorcery this turn is copied, and you can choose new targets.
So if you're playing an instance of sorcery heavy deck, this is absolutely huge. If not, it's still a 2 mana 2/1 that can't be blocked, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know if are there cards that care if other cards have oil counters?
Um, I'm trying to think. I don't know off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm. So if I were early in the draft and I see this card, I would definitely and I were if I were considering playing blue, I would definitely pick it and then adjust, like then start looking for instances and sorceries.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if it's late in the draft, I wouldn't necessarily pick this if it's not my strategy, obviously. So when it's viable, this is a 10, but when it's not, I don't care. So maybe if we were to put it somewhere in between, I would give it an 8.
Okay. Yeah. Like for me, just the fact that it's a 2/1 can't be blocked for 2. Like that alone
Mhm.
makes it a card I would play 100% of the time.
Hmm.
Like on 2 mana, that's just pretty good. It's like
I
instantly
see.
putting your opponent on a clock. And like it'll sometimes copy stuff. You do kind of need to like cast 2 non-creature spells just to get a chance to copy an instant or sorcery, or like do one and then proliferate. So like it's kind of hard to do. Um, and you still need something that's good to copy. Like a lot of instants and sorceries aren't even relevant to copy, like counter spells and things like that. So I think I'll just give it a 7.
Hmm.
All right, next we have Mind Splice Apparatus, which is 3 and a blue. This is terrifying art. It's like spikes everywhere. Yikes. Um, and it's an artifact with flash, and at the beginning of your upkeep, put an oil counter on it, and your instant and sorcery spells cost 1 less to cast for each oil counter on it.
This is really nice. I again, if you're playing an instance or sorcery deck, you would want this card, is how I feel. And I know most decks are not instance and sorceries in draft, maybe almost all aren't,
Mm-hmm.
but it'll just get cheaper every turn. And if maybe you were red blue and you had that really big game ending burn spell, I don't know this set if it has any of those.
Not really.
Like crackle with power and just kill your opponent.
Well,
No?
no. Definitely not. I haven't actually seen red, to be fair, but you're not going to find something like that at common, anyways. Or uncommon. Like, that
Yeah,
was a mythic
fair.
rare. So,
Yeah, that's true.
um,
Um
go
I
ahead.
would still I would still really consider this in the right strategy. So maybe a 7. It's less impressive than the previous one.
Okay, I'm glad you gave it a 7, because I think this is garbage. Like, um, the thing about draft, well, first of all, yes, we know. Few instants and sorceries, probably. You can't, like, have a deck of just that like you probably could in Constructed. Also, like, it's only cost reduction, and like you already spent 4 mana on the thing, you kind of have to like reduce the costs by a lot over the course of the game to like make up for that tempo nothing that this is. Like you play this, it doesn't affect the board whatsoever. Um, and it's only gonna like give you meaningful tempo if like all the stars align. So I just hate it.
Hmm.
I'm gonna give it a 2.
Interesting.
Um, all right. Next we have Serum Sovereign, which is 4 and a blue for a 4/4 creature Phyrexian Sphinx, which has flying, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on this. And you can pay a blue mana to remove an oil counter from it and draw a card, then scry 2. Which is it's funny. There's a card called
Yeah.
Serum Visions, which is basically just that activated ability. Same cost and everything.
It just I've never seen draw then scry, you know? That's new to me. But that's
I
interesting. Why would that be a thing?
don't know, it's just different.
But okay. But yeah, this is a 10.
10? Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm gonna go with 10. Like, 5 mana 4 for flying. That is really good, definitely. I think that makes it like at least an 8 just on that.
Mhm.
And yeah, you just remove one oil counter from it to draw then scry 2, which is pretty strong. Once you get that one counter, you could proliferate it, do it multiple times. Yeah, okay. I agree with 10. It's pretty freaking good. Alright, next we have Unctus Grand Metatect, which is 1 blue blue for a legendary artifact creature. Phyrexian Vidalkin, that's a 2/4. Other blue creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes tapped, draw a card, then discard a card. Other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. And you can also pay a Phyrexian blue, so a blue mana or 2 life, to have target creature you control become a blue artifact in addition to its other colors and types. Activate only as a sorcery. So that's a whole mouthful.
This is great. Like if you have this card, you get card filtering. You get to boost all your artifact creatures. I assume you're going to probably be playing artifact creatures with this deck. And even without that many artifact creatures, just the threat that any creature could become an artifact creature and get a +1/+1 for just 2 life, not even necessarily mana, you know, is enough to scare opponents from, let's say, trading, you know. If I'm attacking with a 2/2, you're not gonna block with a 3/3 that you want to keep
Well, no,
alive.
again, this is sorcery.
Oh, did it say sorcery?
Yeah.
Okay, then that makes it much worse. Still, it's a good card for especially an artifact creature deck. And then then I would say the activated ability to only use it maybe when you're going all in, right?
Maybe. I mean, you just pay a blue mana and then you're gonna draw a card, discard a card. It's pretty worth it. Or yeah,
I would
just
say
your last turn of life, just do it on everything and make your board scarier.
Yeah. I would say it's a lord, right? Is this what you call lords?
You could call that a lord.
Okay. It's a lord to a type of cards that are common in this set.
Yeah.
You know? So, again, my spores are typically if you plan on playing that strategy and whatever strategy you're playing, and if it's like feasible to have the synergies that you want. So if you're trying to go for artifact creatures, this is a must play, right?
Yeah.
Hence why it's like an 8.5, let's say.
Yeah, I was gonna give it a 9. Like, good stats. 2/4 for 3, honestly, already kind of good. And yeah, just buff your whole board and draw lots of cards and just I mean, it's just good. Nothing bad to say about it. All right, now we're on to the mythic rares. We've got Ichormoon Gauntlet, which is 2 and a blue for an artifact. And it says planeswalkers you control have 0 proliferate and -12. Take an extra turn after this one. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, choose a counter on target permanent. Put an additional counter of that kind on that permanent.
So first of all, we can ignore the first part. That's not gonna happen in draft.
Yeah, probably not.
Planeswalkers.
Probably not.
Now maybe, but probably not. So you only get to increase the number of counters you have, like 1 counter.
Yeah, it's not proliferate. It's just 1 counter.
It's a 2.
Yeah, I'm right with you. Like, it doesn't do nothing, but it's pretty bad. In Constructed, like, I've already been playing this in Historic Brawl with, like, my Planeswalker decks. And, like, if you have, like, several Planeswalkers out and they're all just zeroing to proliferate to give all the rest counters, and, like, if you just have, like, 5 Planeswalkers out, you might feel to take, like, infinite extra turns, like, legitimately.
Yeah, I want to play this put this in my Planeswalker deck, but it's like Gatewatch themed. And it's a Phyrexian artifact. So it's not flavorful.
Oh, you Vorthos.
But like I'm trying to rationalize it in my head. I'm like, hey, what if I put completed Gatewatch members in my deck? Then it's flavorful, right? So I'm still thinking about it.
Bad noted, though.
Yeah.
Alright, next we have Jace the Perfected Mind, which is a blue and a Phyrexian blue. Legendary Planeswalker Jace starts with 5 loyalty, and it's completed, which means that if you pay that 2 life for that Phyrexian blue, it enters with 2 less loyalty. The +1 is until your next turn, up to one target creature gets -3/-0. -2, target player mills 3 cards, and if a graveyard has 20 or more cards in it, you draw 3 cards. Otherwise, you just draw 1 card. And -X, target player mills 3 times X cards.
Okay, so you play this, you get to have your opponent mill, let's say, 15 cards. Is that enough to get a mill victory
Probably
in
not.
draft? Yeah, I would not play this at all.
Yeah,
It's a 1.
a 1. I wasn't gonna give it a 1, because, like, at least the +1 stops, like, it makes one of the creatures pretty bad for, like, their attack and also for your blocking, and the -2 is at least a card draw, so you could just pop that and draw a new card. And I mean, honestly, the best thing about this card in general, like, considering construction and everything, is that drawing 3 cards if an opponent has 20 or more cards in it in their graveyard, or if anyone has 20 or more cards in their graveyard. But that's probably not going to happen. Like, even with this card's abilities, I don't really think you're going to get there. And yeah, milling the opponent just doesn't really do anything.
I want to change my score to a 3. Maybe you're playing a graveyard deck, in which case this would make some sense.
Yeah, maybe you can mill yourself. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
give it a 3 also. Alright, and the last blue card, Tekathal Inquiry Dominus, which is 2 blue for a 3/5 legendary creature, Phyrexian Horror with flying. If you would proliferate twice instead. And you can pay 1 Phyrexian blue to remove 3 counters from among other artifacts, creatures, and planeswalkers you control, and put an indestructible counter on this.
This is a 10.
Okay, any reason?
It's just a 4-mana 3/5 flying is already nice. You double your proliferate, which there's a very good chance that's what you're doing this set, you know? And maybe it's hard to get just because of removing 3 counters, but it's also not that hard, probably.
Yeah, I mean, its ability also gives you more counters to play with.
Exactly. So yeah, it's effectively maybe not immediately, but maybe immediately it will be a 4-mana 3/5 flying indestructible. You know, if if I'm playing blue, even if I'm not playing necessarily proliferate, like or a counters deck, I pick this. And if I am playing a counters deck, I'm definitely picking this. That's how I feel.
Yeah, this card's really good. I mean, like you said, great stats, even if it had nothing else. You do kind of have to build around that proliferate thing, but the payoff's big. Put so many counters, make this thing indestructible. It's really good. I'm not gonna give quite a 10. I'm just gonna give it a 9.5, but it's like extremely good. And yeah, that's blue. Let us know what cards you're excited to play in this set in blue, and see you next time.